Right along now, and we welcome in via Skype from Washington, D.C., Republican strategist and former senior staff advisor to President George W. Bush, Brad Blakeman. Brad, it's good to have you tonight on Newsmax Prime. Before we get to the judges, there's another piece of news that I think will interest you and everybody looking in. It's a new Fox News poll that shows Donald Trump beating Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head matchup if the election were today. What we see right here, though, are the favorable, unfavorable ratings. The other graphic we need, if we can bring it up, the other graphic has the overall vote, and Trump would be at 45%, Clinton at 42%. Now, what has been filling the screens here for the last few seconds is the favorability ratings. Both the candidates somewhat underwater, but Mrs. Clinton's unfavorable, now 61%. I got to tell you, Brad, that is absolutely toxic for Mrs. Clinton. Apparently, we're having some problems with Brad's. We'll work to fix that. And let me go back and reiterate, because I want to make sure you understand the overall numbers. This is the real headline. Trump, if the election were held today, wins 45% to 42%. Trump over Hillary Clinton if the election were today. Let us welcome in, as we work to renew the Skype connection in Washington, from New York City, the former Lieutenant Governor of New York State, Betsy McCaughey. Betsy, your smile's got a little extra energy tonight. A lot has been going on, and we were just talking about this brand new poll that has Trump now ahead of Mrs. Clinton and Hillary's unfavorables at the toxic level of 61%.
That's right. The American public is reacting to the news coming out every single day like a drumbeat about the Clintons' corruption, the enormous speaking fees that lack all credibility. What do you do when you go up to a podium for 50 minutes and somebody gives you a check for $700,000? You know there's more to it than just a speech. And yet she won't disclose what she said or what her husband said. And so the voters smell the stench of corruption.
Well, let us talk about the prospect of a conservative jurist on the Supreme Court. Betsy, you're an attorney. We see today Donald Trump putting out 11 people on a list, and thus far he's gotten some high marks for the roster he has put forward as a possible Supreme Court nominee.
That's right, and it's very, very good news for conservatives who are concerned that perhaps Mr. Trump didn't take the judicial nomination process seriously, that he wasn't truly an originalist concerned with limiting the power of the court, making sure that Congress makes laws instead of the court. And this list would reassure any American that the Supreme Court's powers will be limited to interpreting the law, not making the law.
Well, we are pleased that we have made a reconnection via Skype with Brad Blakeman. Brad, welcome back. It was all too brief earlier. Listen, let's go to the phone lines now. And our first call comes from the West Coast. Lakeport, California is where we find Kirk. Kirk, I understand you've got the Supreme Court and presidential politics on your mind tonight.
I do, JD. Nice talking to you, and thanks for having me.
You bet, Kirk.
Yeah, I just think I think one of his best choices. I'm a pro-Trump guy. I got to tell you, I've been with him all along, and I like all of what he's doing for us. You know, I'm not such an old guy to where I can't, take a little bit of humility. I think Ted Cruz would be a great person to appoint on the Supreme Court, simply for the fact that he's been such a constitutional person for our country, as being in our office for so long. I think he's a guy that we could use in our Supreme Court. I think if Donald Trump and the rest of America could kind of get over the fact that the competition between him running for president was, That's just
Yeah,
something
well, it's like,
history
hey, you know, in other campaigns, you're right about it, Kirk. I remember in 1980, George H.W. Bush attacked Ronald Reagan in so-called voodoo economics. They got over that. But, Kirk, I'm going to take your question and ask our panelist right here. Let me go first to Brad Blakeman. The notion of Ted Cruz one day ending up on the Supreme Court. I know he's filed for re-election to the Senate in Texas, but do you think one day we will address him as Mr. Justice Cruz?
I don't think so. I think Ted Cruz is too toxic to get past the Senate. Even if we were to control the Senate, I think we'd wind up in a filibuster. I would like to see somebody not political, but is steeped in judicial knowledge and experience, somebody who has been on the bench. That's what I would like to see, because we have to stop politicizing the court and getting the court back to what its intended use was, and that was to be a co-equal branch of government steeped in the Constitution.
Wow. So no to Cruz. Listen, let's say yes to another phone call from the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. Dale is on the line again. I believe he's calling in from Fredonia. Dale, your thoughts on the Supreme Court and Donald Trump's list? Hello, Dale.
Yes, JD, this is Dale Phelps.
Yes, sir. It's good to have
Kentucky.
you back, pal. And what is your take on this? We got about a minute.
Well, I can live with any of them he's picked, and just like the gentleman said before, I can live with Ted Cruz or Judge Janine, and it's just scary as all get out to think what Hillary Clinton put on the Supreme Court. That woman scares me clean to the bone. She's evil to the bone.
Well, like the old song said, bad to the bone. Betsy, final 40 seconds to you. Is it the toxicity of Hillary Clinton?
Well, first of all, I second exactly what that caller said. Hillary Clinton is queen of corrupt. On the issue of the Supreme Court, the list of 11 that Trump presented today, all experienced jurists, exactly what Brad said. They're experienced, they're not political, they're originalists like Scalia, and any one of them would do a fine job. It was very reassuring to see that list.
And yet there's an essence of the Trump ability to generate conversation. One of the judges on the list from Wisconsin, Judge Diane Sykes, the former spouse of radio talk show host Charlie Sykes, who made it very clear during the Wisconsin primary he was a never Trumper. So there is obviously a qualified jurist. I don't want to diminish her accomplishments in any way, but it is one of those stories that makes Donald Trump Donald Trump. Listen, we want you to stay just where you are and stay just the way you are. When we come back, more of your calls with Betsy and Brad, plus those Democrats. They're the ones who are divided. We'll talk about it next.